Broken heart opening emotional hook. Imagine trusting your husband with everything you've worked for, only to find out he secretly maxed out your credit card while parading around like a king. That's what happened to 31-year-old Nia Mensah. But when the bank called about the frozen account, the truth came crashing down, and the entire community watched as tables turned. The night in Accra glittered with laughter and music as Nia Mensah and her husband, Kwaku, welcomed their friends into a lavish restaurant. The tables overflowed with food, plates of jollof rice and grilled tilapia, drinks being poured like water, and laughter echoing through the air. Kwaku, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, commanded the room with his booming voice. He ordered the most expensive wine without hesitation, waving to the waiter like he owned the place. His friends clapped him on the back, calling him the big man, while he grinned and handed out small gifts. A new watch here, a leather wallet there, as though his pockets had no end. From the outside it looked perfect. Guests whispered about how successful Kwaku must be, how blessed Nia was to have such a generous husband. She sat quietly beside him, her smile soft and polite, her hands folded in her lap as she nodded at their compliments. To everyone else, she seemed the picture of a proud wife, basking in her husband's glory. But deep inside, Nia wondered. Kwaku hadn't spoken much about work lately. He brushed off her questions about his projects with vague answers, always promising big things were coming. Still, she told herself not to doubt him tonight. As the music grew louder and the bills stacked higher, Kwaku raised his glass and shouted, "To success, to family, to living large." The crowd roared back, clinking glasses in celebration. Nia forced another smile, clapping softly along with the others. She wanted to believe this was real, that her husband was thriving, that the future was secure, that the life they were showing off to everyone was built on solid ground. But in her heart, a tiny unease stirred. Something about the way he reveled in attention, the way he gave without thinking, felt less like generosity and more like a performance. She shook the thought away, convincing herself that perhaps this was just his way of celebrating. As the evening stretched on and Kwaku basked in the spotlight, Nia remained the quiet shadow at his side, unaware that this glittering illusion was about to crack in the most painful way. When the dinner was over and the last of the guests had left, Nia returned home with Kwaku. He fell into bed almost immediately, still smiling like a man who had conquered the world. The room was quiet, the city sounds faint outside the window, and for a moment, Nia thought the evening was finally behind them. She slipped off her shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened her phone. That's when the message appeared. An alert from the bank. Her heart skipped. It said her credit card had reached its limit. First she thought it was a mistake. She refreshed the screen, checked again, hoping she had read it wrong. But the numbers didn't lie. The balance was gone, the card completely maxed out. Her mind raced. This wasn't his account. This wasn't the company card. This was hers, the card she used carefully, the one she guarded for emergencies and important expenses. A cold feeling spread in her chest as she scrolled through the transactions. Expensive shoes, flashy watches, countless restaurant bills, all tied to her card. Nia glanced over at Kwaku. He was lying peacefully, chest rising and falling, a faint smirk still resting on his face even in sleep, like a man proud of himself. The sight made her throat tighten. How could he rest so easily while her stomach twisted in knots? She wanted to wake him to ask him why, but the words stuck in her throat. What if she was overreacting? What if he had a plan she didn't know about? She set her phone down and leaned against the headboard, staring into the dark. The doubt pressed harder with every passing second. The man who just hours ago raised a glass showering friends with gifts and laughter had been spending money that wasn't his. It was hers. Their guests had called her lucky, but tonight she didn't feel lucky at all. She felt used, like a silent partner in a game she didn't agree to play. Still, she swallowed her worry, burying it deep inside. Maybe he would explain in the morning. Maybe this was temporary. But in her heart, Nia knew something was breaking, and that email was the first crack in the picture-perfect life she thought she had. The next few days only deepened Nia's unease. Each morning a new package arrived at their doorstep. Shiny boxes, glossy bags, the kind of deliveries that screamed of money. luxury shoes wrapped in silk tissue, watches that glimmered under the light, and gadgets that seemed unnecessary but expensive. Every delivery man looked at her with envy, as if she was the queen of a household dripping in wealth. But inside, her stomach twisted tighter with every box she carried inside. At first, Nia hoped maybe these were gifts for clients, maybe some business investment she wasn't aware of. But the more she looked, the more obvious it became. These weren't tokens of business. They were indulgences. And they weren't being bought with Kwaku's money. They were being charged to her card. The same card she had worked so hard to keep safe, the same savings she had carefully built. One evening, as Kwaku proudly opened yet another watch and slipped it onto his wrist, Nia couldn't hold it in any longer. Her voice shook as she asked, "Kwaku, what is all this? Do you realize these charges are on my account? This is my card." Her words cut through the air, heavy with fear and confusion. But instead of guilt, Kwaku gave her that confident, careless smile, the one that used to charm her but now made her skin crawl. He waved his hand like it was nothing and said, "Don't worry. I'll pay it back. Besides, it's all for us. For us." Those two words echoed in her head like a cruel joke. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe there was a plan, that this wasn't as dangerous as it seemed. But the truth was written in her tightening chest, in the way her heart sank deeper every time he spoke. This wasn't love. It was betrayal dressed up in shiny boxes and empty promises. Nia turned away, her eyes stinging, pretending to busy herself with the packages so he wouldn't see her tears. On the outside she nodded silently, but inside she felt something crack. The trust she had given him, the trust she built her marriage on, was being chipped away, piece by piece, with every delivery that landed on their doorstep. The morning started quietly, sunlight slipping through the curtains, the smell of coffee still hanging in the air. Nia was folding laundry when her phone buzzed on the table. It was a number she didn't recognize, but something in her gut told her to answer. The voice on the other end was firm, professional, but each word hit her like a stone. "Good morning, Mrs. Mensah. We're calling from your bank. Your account has been frozen due to repeated overdrafts." Her heart stopped. For a second, she couldn't even process what was being said. She gripped the phone tighter, her hands trembling. "Frozen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The officer explained calmly, almost mechanically, how too many charges, too many overdrafts had drained everything she had. Every sadie she had saved from years of long hours, every sacrifice she had made to build her small business, every safety net she thought she had gone. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, her legs weak. The room spun around her as the officer's voice faded into background noise. Images flashed in her mind, the late nights she worked while Kwaku promised he was handling things, the moments she trusted him to manage their finances, the blind faith she had placed in him because that's what marriage was supposed to be built on. But now, all that trust had turned into quicksand beneath her feet. When the call ended, she sat in silence, staring at the wall. Her chest felt heavy, like she was being crushed under the weight of betrayal. She glanced around the room, the expensive shoes lined up neatly, the flashy watches glittering on the dresser, the gadgets scattered like trophies. All of it had come at a cost she never agreed to pay. They weren't signs of success. They were monuments of her broken trust. Her hands shook as she covered her face, tears finally slipping through. "How could he do this to me?" she whispered into her palms. The man she thought was her partner had stolen not just her money, but her security, her peace, her faith in love. That morning marked the breaking point. Something inside her snapped, but it wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of resolve. Nia knew she could no longer stand quietly in the shadow of Kwaku's lies. Something had to change, and this time, she would not be the one left shattered. The days after the frozen account call felt like a fog to Nia, but deep inside, something pushed her to search for answers. She could no longer accept Kwaku's smooth words or his careless laughter. Late at night, while he snored beside her, she sat with her laptop, scrolling through bank statements line by line. Each transaction was like a knife to her chest. Late-night charges to gambling sites, endless transfers for luxury items, dinners at expensive restaurants she never attended. Every sadie had been drained with reckless abandon, And it all traced back to him. Her breath caught when she noticed the salary deposits had stopped months ago. At first she thought it was a mistake, but the truth unfolded quickly. Kwaku hadn't just been careless. He had quit his job in silence, never telling her. While she had been working, saving, and building their future, he had been burning through her hard-earned money to live a life of pretense. One afternoon while he was out, she checked his desk drawers. Stacks of casino flyers and receipts fell into her hands. The realization made her knees buckle. He hadn't been networking or investing like he claimed. He had been gambling online, throwing her money into games of chance while parading around the community as though he were a self-made king. Her mind replayed every dinner, every boastful smile he gave when friends clapped him on the back. They had praised his success, his generosity, his big heart. But now Nia saw it clearly. It wasn't generosity, it was theft cloaked in charm. He had stolen not just her money but her dignity, presenting himself as the provider while she was the real backbone holding everything together. Anger welled in her throat, hot and uncontrollable. Tears blurred her vision, but this time they weren't only from sadness. They were from fury. How dare he betray her trust like this? How dare he gamble away her sacrifices? The nights she stayed up working to pay bills, the mornings she left the house before dawn chasing contracts and clients. Nia closed the drawer with trembling hands, her jaw clenched. She had uncovered the truth, and now there was no turning back. Kwaku thought he was clever, hiding behind his charm and loud laughter, but his lies were crumbling. And as her anger burned, a new fire sparked inside her, one that whispered of justice, of strength, of reclaiming everything he thought he had taken from her. Nia knew storming into the living room and screaming at Kwaku would give her nothing but more lies. He would twist the truth, charm his way out, maybe even blame her. No, she thought, not this time. This time she would be smart, quiet, and prepared. She kept her face calm whenever he was around, even managing a small smile when he bragged about his so-called business deals. But inside her mind was racing, planning every step of her escape. The first thing she did was protect what was truly hers. One evening while Kwaku was out, she sat at her desk and opened her business accounts. With a steady hand, she transferred her funds into a brand new account under her name alone, one he would never know existed. As each transfer went through, her heart beat faster, but she also felt lighter, stronger. Piece by piece, she was taking her life back. Next came the legal safety net. The very next morning, Nia walked into her lawyer's office, clutching a folder filled with bank statements, receipts, and records of every overdraft. Her lawyer flipped through the pages, eyebrows rising. "You've been carrying him," he said softly, "but you've also built a strong case." Together, they filed paperwork that separated her business assets from Kwaku's reach. She made sure that if the debts came crashing down, they would land only on him, not her. Nia didn't stop there. She began collecting evidence carefully, almost like a detective. Every gambling receipt, every email notification, every frozen account statement went into a binder. She wasn't going to accuse him blindly. She was going to have proof. She wanted the truth to speak louder than his excuses. At home she played her role perfectly. When Kwaku handed her flowers one evening, pretending to be the loving husband, she smiled and thanked him, though inside she wondered which of her stolen sadies had paid for them. When he bragged to his friends over the phone, she cooked dinner quietly, hiding the fire burning inside her. He thought she was still in the dark, but Nia was already building her escape route, step by step. By the time her plan was complete, Nia no longer felt like the betrayed wife. She felt like a warrior waiting for the right moment. And she promised herself, when the truth finally exploded, it would be in front of everyone. Kwaku wouldn't just face her anger. He would face his own downfall. The night of the party, the house buzzed with music and laughter. Guests filled the living room, glasses clinking, plates stacked with food, all arranged by Kwaku, who strutted around like a peacock. He threw his arm around shoulders, boasted about his big contracts, and even tipped the waiters as if he were a millionaire. Nia moved gracefully through the crowd, her face calm, her heart pounding. She knew tonight would be different. Tonight the mask would slip. Kwaku raised a toast, his voice booming above the chatter. "To success!" he shouted, his friends cheering loudly. He basked in their admiration, telling stories about deals he never signed and money he never earned. People nodded, impressed by the illusion he had built. But just as the applause died down, his phone began to ring. The number flashing on the screen was from the bank. Everyone watched as he answered, placing the phone on speaker to show off. The voice on the other end was steady, professional, but sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Mr. Kwaku, the officer said. "We're calling regarding your wife's account. It has been frozen due to excessive spending and unpaid debts." The room went silent, every eye fixed on Kwaku. For the first time, his confident smile faltered. His glass slipped slightly in his hand, and his face drained of color. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "His wife's account," someone murmured. "So it wasn't even his money?" The admiration that had filled the room moments before shifted into judgment, curiosity, even disgust. Nia stood near the corner, watching it unfold exactly as she had prepared for. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was finally speaking for her. Kwaku tried to laugh it off. "A small misunderstanding," he stammered, waving his hand. "You know how banks can be." But his voice cracked and his eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out. No one laughed with him. His friends who once cheered were now whispering behind their hands, shaking their heads. The pride he carried so boldly had crumbled in a single phone call. Nia lifted her chin slightly, her silence louder than any accusation. The man who had paraded her money as his own was finally exposed, not in private, but in front of the very crowd he tried so hard to impress. And in that moment, the weight of shame shifted entirely onto him. For a moment, the room froze. The music had stopped, laughter had died, and only the sound of shallow breathing filled the air. Everyone's eyes shifted between Kwaku's pale face and Nia's calm but powerful presence as she stepped forward. Her heels clicked against the tiled floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat of truth. She held a folder tightly in her hand, papers neatly arranged inside, the evidence of everything she had uncovered. Her voice rang out, steady and firm, cutting through the heavy silence. "Every sadi you spent," she said, lifting the documents high for all to see, "was mine. You lived like a king on my sweat, my hard work, my savings. You tried to humiliate me, to bury me under debt. But tonight the truth is out, and it cannot be buried." Her words struck like lightning, and a collective gasp ran through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers rose like waves in the ocean. "It was her money all along," someone murmured, and soon others repeated it, each whisper louder, sharper, undeniable. Kwaku's lips trembled as he reached out, desperate to stop her, but Nia stepped back, refusing to let him close the distance. Her eyes blazed with dignity. "You stood here pretending to be a man of wealth, a man of success. But every bottle you bought, every gift you handed out, every party you hosted, it was stolen from me. From the very woman you vowed to protect." The sting of betrayal sat heavy in the air, and not a single guest dared to interrupt. She spread the papers on the table, bank statements, transfer receipts, screenshots of his gambling transactions. The evidence was undeniable. Guests leaned in, their whispers now tinged with disbelief and shame for ever praising him. Kwaku's proud chest collapsed, his hands shaking as he tried to defend himself, but no one was listening anymore. The spotlight was no longer his, it was hers. Nia straightened her shoulders, her voice firm but calm. "Respect cannot be stolen. Dignity cannot be borrowed. And tonight I take back what's mine." Her words settled over the room like a final verdict. People nodded quietly, eyes fixed on her with admiration. For the first time, Nia was not just the wife behind the scenes. She was the woman who had stood up, exposed the lies, and reclaimed her power. Kwaku's voice cracked as he stumbled forward, his hand stretched out as though reaching for forgiveness he could no longer touch. "Nia, please, it was a mistake. I'll fix it, I promise." His words shook with desperation, but they carried no weight anymore. The same man who once strutted through parties with his chin high and laughter loud was now trembling, his pride shattered into pieces before everyone's eyes. Guests who had once clung to his side now shifted uncomfortably, some turning their faces away, others shaking their heads in silent judgment. The silence was broken not by Nia, but by the sudden knock at the door. Heavy, firm, impatient. When it opened, two stern-looking men stepped in, creditors, carrying folders thick with debt records and official letters. They called Kwaku by name, their tone sharp, demanding repayment. The room gasped again, but this time no one looked at Nia. Every eye was fixed on him, the man exposed, the man undone. Kwaku's knees seemed to buckle as the reality weighed him down. His friends, once eager to ride on his false glory, began to slide quietly toward the door, avoiding his gaze, muttering excuses as they escaped the humiliation. Kwaku reached out to one of them. "Kwasi, you know me, brother, tell them I'll pay." But Kwasi shook his head, stepping back. "I thought you were a man of means, Kwaku. Turns out, you were only a shadow standing in her light." The words hit harder than any blow, and soon others joined in the silent rejection. One by one they disappeared, leaving him surrounded not by admiration but by shame. His voice grew smaller with each plea, his once confident tone replaced by a broken whisper. "Nia, forgive me, please." But she stood still, calm and composed, her dignity unshaken. For the first time the mask of arrogance had slipped away, and what remained was a man hollowed by his own lies. His empire of pride had crumbled, and nothing remained but debt, disgrace, and the harsh truth. Kwaku realized then it wasn't just money he had lost. It wasn't just a house or friends or a reputation. He had lost respect, the very thing he had tried to steal from her. And without respect, he had nothing left at all. The sun streamed through the tall glass windows of Nia's new office, the kind of place that whispered success with every polished surface and every stack of neatly signed contracts. She sat behind her sleek desk, not as a woman who had once been humiliated, but as a leader, a creator, and a force no one could ignore. The room was alive with quiet energy, phones ringing, assistants moving with purpose, clients waiting eagerly in the reception area. Every detail spoke of her rise, a rise built not on borrowed pride, but on her own resilience and brilliance. Nia leaned back in her chair, a soft smile tugging at her lips. The memory of Kwaku's smirk when he maxed out her card still flashed in her mind, but it no longer hurt. If anything, it had become fuel, the spark that had pushed her to dig deeper, to prove not to him but to herself that she was far more than the limits he tried to place on her. The very card he thought would break her had become the beginning of her empire. As the cameras rolled for a media feature on her growing consulting firm, she didn't flinch or hide. Instead, she looked straight into the lens, her voice calm, steady, and filled with power. "He maxed out my card, thinking it would break me," she said, her tone carrying the weight of her journey. But what he didn't know was that strength cannot be frozen, only debts can. The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgettable, echoing the truth she had lived. Outside the office, a massive banner bore her name, Nia Solutions Consulting, turning setbacks into success. It wasn't just a company, it was a symbol, a reminder to every person who had ever been underestimated that dignity, once reclaimed, could never be taken away again. Employees moved with pride, knowing they were part of something bigger than business. They were part of a legacy born from resilience. And Nia, sitting tall in her chair, knew this was just the beginning. What had once been meant to humiliate her had instead forged her strength into something unshakable. She was no longer the woman they mocked. She was the woman they admired, the woman they respected, the woman who rose with dignity and never looked back.